The sharp morning light filtering through tall windows did nothing to flatter Miss Katherine Harrington's complexion. She stood quietly in the corner of Lady Pembroke's drawing-room, observing the fashionable gathering with clear, intelligent eyes while the matrons of London society pretended not to notice her presence. At 26, Katherine had long accepted her position as a perpetual wallflower, a companion to her younger, more vivacious cousin, and a subject of whispered pity. "Poor Miss Harrington," she overheard Lady Rutherford murmur behind her fan to the Countess of Derbyshire. "Another season nearly gone, and still unwed. Though with those features and that dreadful pallor, one can hardly be surprised." Katherine's fingers tightened imperceptibly around her teacup, but her expression remained placid. 5 years as her aunt's dependent had taught her the art of appearing deaf to cruelty disguised as concern. She took a measured sip of rapidly cooling tea and focused instead on the intricate pattern of the Persian carpet. "Her cousin Miss Jennings will make a splendid match, however," Lady Rutherford continued. "Such a beauty, and that fortune! They say Lord Wilmington is quite smitten." "A pity the same advantages weren't bestowed upon Miss Harrington," the Countess replied. "Plain as she is, and with nothing but that small annuity from her father, she'll likely remain a burden on her relatives indefinitely." Katherine set her cup down with precise movements. "Excuse me, I believe my cousin requires my assistance," she murmured to no one in particular before slipping away toward the terrace doors, desperate for a moment of solitude. The terrace provided blessed relief from the stuffiness of the drawing-room. Katherine drew a deep breath of spring air, savoring the scent of newly bloomed roses climbing the stone balustrade. London's fashionable Mayfair stretched before her, a maze of elegant townhouses and exclusive squares that had never truly welcomed her. "Escaping the vultures, Miss Harrington?" The deep voice startled her. Katherine turned to find herself facing the tall figure of the Duke of Lowell, his broad shoulders blocking the sun. Edward Lowell, the 8th Duke, was notorious throughout London for his cutting wit, formidable intelligence, and complete disregard for society's expectations. At 34, he remained stubbornly unwed despite being one of England's most eligible bachelors. "Your Grace," Katherine cursed, mortified to be caught in her moment of weakness. "Forgive me, I didn't realize anyone was here." "No forgiveness necessary." The Duke's penetrating grey eyes studied her with unsettling intensity. "I too find that drawing-room insufferable. Lady Pembroke insists on overheating it to a degree that makes rational thought impossible." Despite herself, Katherine smiled. "Perhaps she believes discomfort encourages shorter visits, Your Grace." A flicker of surprise crossed the Duke's face, followed by something that might have been appreciation. "An astute observation, Miss Harrington. I've always suspected Lady Pembroke of being far cleverer than she pretends." "Most women are, Your Grace." The words slipped out before Katherine could reconsider their wisdom. Rather than taking offense, the Duke's mouth curved into a rare smile. "Indeed. A fact many gentlemen of my acquaintance would be wise to remember." He gestured to the garden below. "Would you care to walk? The roses are particularly fine this year." Katherine hesitated, acutely aware that accepting such an invitation from England's most notorious bachelor would set tongues wagging. Yet something in the Duke's direct gaze, not the practiced flattery she'd seen directed at pretty débutantes, but genuine interest, compelled her to nod. "I would enjoy that, Your Grace, though I shouldn't be gone long. My aunt will be looking for me." "Let her look," he replied, offering his arm. "I find I've waited quite long enough for an uninterrupted conversation with you, Miss Harrington." The declaration bewildered Katherine. "With me, Your Grace? I fear there has been some mistake. We've scarcely exchanged more than formal greetings at previous gatherings." "No mistake." His voice was firm as they descended the stone steps into Lady Pembroke's immaculate garden. "I've observed you for 3 seasons now, Miss Harrington. You're the only woman in London society who reads Latin poetry when you believe no one is watching, who engages the foreign diplomats in their native tongues at embassy functions, and who appears genuinely interested in political debates rather than merely pretending to be to attract a husband." Katherine stopped walking, stunned by his words. "You've noticed all that?" "I notice everything of consequence, Miss Harrington." The Duke's expression was serious. Intelligence and character are far too rare in our circles to go unrecognized. Before Katherine could formulate a response, the garden path revealed her cousin Sophia Jennings approaching on the arm of Lord Wilmington, her golden curls bouncing with each step, her laugh musical in the spring air. "Katherine!" Sophia called, her beautiful face registering shock at finding her plain cousin in the company of the Duke. "Whatever are you doing out here? Aunt is looking everywhere for you." Her eyes darted meaningfully between Katherine and the Duke, naked curiosity evident. Lord Wilmington bowed deeply. "Your Grace, a pleasure. I hadn't realized you and Miss Harrington were acquainted." "We're becoming so," the Duke replied coolly. "Miss Harrington was just educating me on the varieties of roses Lady Pembroke cultivates. Her knowledge is quite impressive." Katherine felt a rush of gratitude for the fabrication that preserved her dignity. "His Grace is too kind. I was merely commenting on their beauty." "How unexpected," Sophia said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Well, Katherine, do come along. Aunt specifically requested your help with something or other." The Duke's hand tightened imperceptibly on Katherine's arm. "Perhaps Miss Harrington might continue our discussion at Lady Avery's musicale this evening? I found your observations most illuminating." Before Katherine could respond, Sophia interjected, "Oh, I'm afraid we won't be attending. Our cousin Thomas has just arrived from Oxford, and we're having a family dinner." The lie flowed smoothly from her lovely lips. "How disappointing," the Duke replied, his gaze fixed on Katherine. "Another time, perhaps, Miss Harrington." Katherine managed a nod, acutely aware of Sophia's fingernails digging into her arm as she was led away. The moment they were out of earshot, her cousin rounded on her. "What game are you playing, Katherine? The Duke of Lowell? Have you taken leave of your senses?" "We were merely conversing, Sophia. He happened upon me on the terrace." Sophia's perfect features twisted unpleasantly. "Men like the Duke don't merely converse with women like you without reason. He's notorious for his cutting remarks and disdain for society. Either he's amusing himself at your expense, or—" She paused, a new thought dawning. "Katherine, you mustn't embarrass yourself by reading too much into his attention. Everyone knows he must eventually marry someone of suitable breeding and beauty. Someone like you." Katherine finished quietly. "I'm merely being realistic," Sophia replied, not bothering to deny it. "Come, we're attending Lady Avery's musicale tonight, and you'll wear my blue gown. Perhaps Lord Wilmington's elder brother might notice you. He's nearly 40 and rather nearsighted, perfectly suitable." Katherine allowed herself to be led back toward the house, the brief warmth of the Duke's attention already fading under her cousin's withering assessment. That evening at Lady Avery's musicale, she wore Sophia's cast-off blue silk, altered hastily by her nimble fingers to better fit her more angular frame, and positioned herself in the corner where she might observe without being observed. The Duke arrived unfashionably late, his commanding presence causing a stir among the assembled guests. Katherine watched as ambitious mothers maneuvered their daughters into his path, as pretty débutantes fluttered their fans and laughed too loudly at his remarks. When his gaze finally swept the room and found her, the intensity of his stare sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. He made his way deliberately toward her corner, ignoring several attempts to engage him in conversation. "Miss Harrington," he said, bowing formally. "I'm pleased to see your cousin was mistaken about your attendance this evening." "As am I, Your Grace," Katherine replied, acutely aware of the curious eyes now fixed upon them. "Though I confess I'm surprised you sought me out in this crowd." "Are you?" He raised an eyebrow. "Then you underestimate your own worth." Before she could formulate a response, he continued, "Would you honor me with the next dance?" A quadrille was forming, and Katherine hesitated. She danced adequately but rarely received invitations. "Your Grace, there are many eager partners available to you this evening. I wouldn't wish to disappoint. The only disappointment would be your refusal." He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she placed her gloved fingers in his palm. As they took their positions, Katherine became painfully aware of the whispers rippling through the assembly. The Duke of Lowell dancing with plain Miss Harrington? What possible explanation could there be? They're wondering why I've chosen you, the Duke murmured as they circled each other in the figures of the dance. The thought had occurred to me as well, Your Grace, Katherine admitted. His lips curved slightly. Do you know what I see when I look at you, Miss Harrington? I couldn't presume to guess. I see a woman who has cultivated her mind rather than merely her appearance. Who observes and understands the world around her with remarkable clarity. Whose eyes reveal intelligence that most of these peacocks wouldn't recognize if it were presented to them on a silver salver. The dance separated them momentarily before bringing them back together. And I find that infinitely more attractive than conventional beauty. Katherine nearly missed a step. You flatter me, Your Grace. I never flatter, Miss Harrington. I merely observe. The dance concluded, but rather than returning her to her corner, the Duke guided her toward the terrace doors. Might we continue our conversation from this morning? I find myself curious about your thoughts on Keats. The cool night air was a relief after the crowded ballroom. Katherine knew she was risking her reputation by allowing this tete-a-tete, but the opportunity to engage in genuine conversation proved too tempting to resist. I find his sensuality compelling, she admitted, though I prefer the complexity of Donne. She's all states, and all princes I, nothing else is, the Duke quoted, his voice low. You know his work well. I know what speaks to me. The Duke's gaze was steady in the moonlight. Just as I know that behind your quiet demeanor lies a passionate nature, Miss Harrington. Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. You cannot possibly know that, Your Grace. Can't I? Your hands betray you. The slight ink stains suggest you write frequently. Your eyes linger on art with genuine appreciation rather than fashionable disinterest. And just now, when speaking of poetry you admire, your voice took on a warmth that reveals depths I suspect few have bothered to discover. Before Katherine could respond, the terrace doors opened abruptly, spilling light and music into their private conversation. Her aunt, Lady Harrington, stood framed in the doorway, her face a mask of disapproval. Katherine! What on earth are you thinking? Come inside at once. She turned to the Duke with a forced smile. Your Grace, please forgive my niece's impropriety. She sometimes forgets her place. The Duke's expression hardened. There has been no impropriety, Lady Harrington. Miss Katherine and I were discussing literature. Nevertheless, Lady Harrington insisted, extending a bony hand toward Katherine, she must return to the ballroom. People are beginning to notice her absence. Katherine moved to obey, years of conditioning making compliance automatic, but the Duke's voice stopped her. Miss Harrington, might I call upon you tomorrow? I have a volume of Donne sonnets I believe you would enjoy. Lady Harrington's eyes widened with alarm. Your Grace, that's most kind, but Katherine will be occupied tomorrow. Family obligations, you understand. The day after, then, he persisted. Katherine found her voice. I would be honored, Your Grace. Lady Harrington's grip on Katherine's arm tightened painfully as she was led back into the ballroom. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of recriminations and warnings from her aunt, punctuated by Sophia's increasingly petulant complaint about Katherine stealing attention that rightfully belonged to her. By the following morning, Katherine's brief encounter with the Duke had become the talk of London society. Speculation ran rampant. Was he amusing himself with the plain spinster? Was it a wager? Or perhaps, most cruelly suggested, he was using her to discourage the more aggressive marriage-minded débutantes. Katherine endured the whispers with outward composure while inwardly wrestling with her own doubts. Men like the Duke of Lowell did not seriously pursue women like Katherine Harrington. This was an immutable law of society as fixed as the stars. Whatever his interest, she told herself sternly, it would fade once the novelty wore off. Yet when the Duke's carriage arrived precisely at the appointed hour 2 days later, Katherine found herself hurrying to the drawing-room with uncharacteristic eagerness. She had chosen her best day dress, a modest moss-green muslin that complemented her hazel eyes, and arranged her chestnut hair in a simple but becoming style. Her aunt intercepted her at the drawing-room door, lips pressed into a thin line. "Katherine, I must speak plainly. This attention from the Duke cannot possibly lead anywhere appropriate. You are not the kind of woman men like him marry." Katherine flinched but kept her voice steady. "I'm well aware of my limitations, Aunt. We merely share literary interests. Do not deceive yourself. When he inevitably moves on to more suitable prospects, the gossip and humiliation will be unbearable." Lady Harrington's expression softened slightly. "I speak from concern, my dear. I wouldn't see you hurt." "Thank you for your concern," Katherine replied, the words hollow in her throat. "But I assure you, my expectations are appropriately modest." The Duke awaited her in the drawing-room, his tall figure making the modest space seem suddenly smaller. He held a leather-bound volume in his hands, which he presented to her with a slight bow. "As promised, Miss Harrington. My personal copy of Donne's works. The annotations in the margins are my own. I hope you'll forgive the presumption of sharing them with you." Katherine accepted the book with reverent hands. "This is too generous, Your Grace. I shall take the greatest care with it. I've no doubt." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "I thought perhaps we might discuss it in the park? The weather is uncommonly fine today." Lady Harrington materialized at Katherine's elbow. "I fear Katherine isn't well enough for an outing, Your Grace. A slight headache, you understand." Katherine saw the Duke's jaw tighten. "How unfortunate. Perhaps Miss Harrington might speak for herself regarding her condition." Something in his tone, a challenge, perhaps, or simply respect for her autonomy, gave Katherine courage. "Actually, Aunt, I feel perfectly well. A walk would be most welcome." Lady Harrington's nostrils flared, but years in society had taught her to mask anger in company. "Well, I suppose if you're certain, though Sophia will be most disappointed to miss the Duke's visit. She's expected home any moment." "Another time, perhaps," the Duke said smoothly, offering Katherine his arm. "Shall we, Miss Harrington?" The park was indeed glorious that afternoon, spring sunlight dappling the paths and glinting off the serpentine. Katherine walked beside the Duke, acutely aware of the curious glances and whispers that followed them. Yet for once, she found herself unconcerned with society's judgment, too engrossed in the Duke's observations on literature, art, and politics to remember her usual self-consciousness. "You have a remarkable mind, Miss Harrington," the Duke said as they paused beside the water. "It's criminal that you've been relegated to the periphery of society based on superficial assessments. You're very kind, Your Grace, but I've long accepted my position. Not everyone can be a diamond of the first water like my cousin. Beauty without substance is merely decoration," he replied dismissively. "Sophia Jennings may capture admiration, but you, Katherine, command respect, at least from those discerning enough to recognize your worth." The use of her Christian name sent a shiver through Katherine. "You should be careful, Your Grace. Such statements might be misconstrued." "Would that be so terrible?" His grey eyes held hers steadily. Before she could answer, their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lord and Lady Thornfield, close friends of the Duke. "Lowell," Lord Thornfield called jovially. "We thought that was you." Lady Thornfield insisted we say hello. His eyes fell on Katherine with mild surprise. "Miss Harrington, isn't it? Sophia Jennings' cousin." Katherine cursed, acknowledging her perpetual secondary status with practiced grace. "Lord Thornfield, Lady Thornfield. What a pleasure." Lady Thornfield's assessing gaze moved between Katherine and the Duke with poorly disguised curiosity. "We missed you at the Havishams' dinner last evening, Lowell. Lady Essex was quite disappointed by your absence." "I had a previous engagement," the Duke replied smoothly. "With your books, no doubt," Lord Thornfield laughed. "Though I must say, it's good to see you enjoying more sociable pursuits today." The implication was clear, and Katherine felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. Indeed, the Duke agreed, his hand moving to rest lightly at Catherine's back. Miss Harrington has been kind enough to share her insights on Donne's sonnets. Her analysis is quite extraordinary. Lady Thornfield's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. How intellectual! Though I'm sure Miss Harrington would also enjoy the Havisham's musicale tomorrow evening. Perhaps you might escort her, Lowell? It would be a change from her usual role as her cousin's companion. The invitation, though framed as kindness, carried a distinct undercurrent of mockery. Katherine opened her mouth to politely decline, but the Duke spoke first. An excellent suggestion. Miss Harrington, would you do me the honor? Trapped between embarrassment and the undeniable desire to spend more time in the Duke's company, Katherine found herself nodding. If you wish, Your Grace. Splendid. Lady Thornfield's smile didn't reach her eyes. We shall look forward to seeing you both there. After the Thornfields departed, Katherine turned to the Duke, distress evident in her face. Your Grace, I fear I've placed you in an awkward position. People will talk. Let them, he replied with characteristic directness. I've never concerned myself with the opinions of those whose minds are too small to recognize true worth. But your reputation is my own to manage. He took her gloved hand in his. Katherine, please believe that I seek your company because I genuinely desire it, not from any ulterior motive or passing whim. The earnestness in his expression silenced her objections. They completed their walk in comfortable conversation, and when he returned her to her aunt's townhouse, Katherine found herself counting the hours until she might see him again. That evening, as she sat brushing her hair before bed, Sophia burst into her room without knocking, her lovely face flushed with indignation. Is it true? Has the Duke invited you to the Havisham's musicale tomorrow? Katherine met her cousin's gaze in the mirror. Yes. Lady Thornfield suggested it during our encounter in the park. This is ridiculous. Sophia paced the small room. Everyone knows he's merely amusing himself with you. Do you realize people are laughing behind your back? They're saying he's either gone mad or is playing some elaborate joke. The word stung, but Katherine kept her voice level. The Duke has been nothing but respectful and genuine in his attentions. Genuine? Sophia laughed incredulously. Look at yourself, Katherine. Plain, penniless, with no connections worth mentioning. Men like the Duke marry women like me, beautiful, wealthy, from impeccable families. Whatever game he's playing, you're making yourself ridiculous by participating in it. Katherine set down her brush, turning to face her cousin directly. Perhaps you're right, Sophia. Perhaps tomorrow he'll realize his mistake and never call again. But for now, he sees something in me that no one else has bothered to look for, and I find I'm not willing to dismiss that experience simply because it defies convention. Sophia stared at her, momentarily speechless. You actually believe he could have serious intentions toward you? I don't know what to believe, Katherine admitted. But I intend to discover the truth for myself rather than accepting society's judgment. Aunt will never allow it, Sophia warned. She's already written to Uncle Henry about the situation. Katherine's heart sank. Her Uncle Henry, her legal guardian since her father's death, was a stern, practical man who had reluctantly provided for her education but considered his duty discharged once she reached adulthood. If he decided the Duke's attention was inappropriate, he could easily remove her from London altogether. I see, she said quietly. Then I shall enjoy tomorrow evening all the more, knowing it may be my last in such distinguished company. The Havisham's musicale the following evening proved to be both a triumph and a torment for Katherine. The Duke arrived promptly to escort her, handsome in formal evening wear, and treated her with such marked attention that even the most skeptical observers began to wonder if his interest might be genuine. He procured refreshments, introduced her to his inner circle, and kept her by his side throughout the musical performances. Yet the undercurrent of malicious speculation remained palpable. Katherine overheard snippets of conversation behind fans and in doorways. Poor thing, she actually believes she has a chance with him. I give it a fortnight before he tires of the novelty. Perhaps she's secretly wealthy? There must be some explanation. The Duke, seeming to sense her discomfort, guided her toward a relatively private alcove during the intermission. "You're quiet tonight. Have I done something to offend?" Katherine managed a small smile. "Not at all, Your Grace. I'm simply overwhelmed by the attention our association has generated. Does it trouble you greatly what they say?" "I've grown accustomed to being the subject of pity," she replied honestly. "But I confess I find it difficult to be the subject of ridicule." His expression darkened. "Because they cannot comprehend why I would choose your company over that of their vapid daughters." "Because they're not entirely wrong to question it," Katherine said softly. "You are a duke, and I am a penniless companion with no particular claims to beauty or distinction. By every standard society recognizes, your interest in me is incomprehensible. Then society's standards are fundamentally flawed." The Duke took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm through her glove. "Katherine, I have spent my adult life surrounded by women chosen and polished specifically to attract men of my station. Women trained to hide their true thoughts, to simper and flatter and manipulate. In you, I found something infinitely more precious: authenticity, intelligence, and a quiet dignity that outshines all their cultivated charms." Katherine's heart raced at his words. "Edward," she began, then caught herself. "Your Grace, Edward, please," he insisted. "At least when we're relatively private." "Edward," she repeated, savoring the intimacy. "I fear you place me on a pedestal of your own creation. I am as flawed and human as anyone. Your humility only confirms my assessment." His fingers tightened around hers. "Katherine, I must speak plainly. My attention to you is neither casual nor fleeting. I have watched you for 3 seasons, always at the periphery, always overlooked. When I finally gathered the courage to approach you, I discovered that the woman behind the quiet exterior exceeded even my highest expectations." Before Katherine could respond, a commotion near the entrance to the ballroom drew their attention. Her Uncle Henry had arrived, his imposing figure flanked by Lady Harrington and a triumphant-looking Sophia. "I believe my time in London is about to be cut short," Katherine said, resignation in her voice. Edward followed her gaze and frowned. "Your uncle?" "Yes. And judging by his expression, he doesn't approve of your attention any more than my aunt does. Then perhaps we should give him something substantive to disapprove of." Edward's eyes held a determined gleam. "Katherine, would you walk with me in the garden? There are matters I wish to discuss before your uncle interrupts us." Though she knew it would only inflame the situation, Katherine nodded. They slipped out through the terrace doors just as her uncle spotted them across the crowded room. The Havisham's garden was illuminated by strategically placed lanterns, casting a romantic glow over the manicured paths and blooming flowers. Edward led her to a stone bench partially concealed by a weeping willow, its curtain of branches offering a modicum of privacy. "Katherine," he began, taking both her hands in his, "I had planned a more conventional approach, but circumstances appear to have forced my hand. I find I cannot bear the thought of your being sent away before I've made my intentions clear." Katherine's breath caught. "Your intentions?" "I wish to court you properly, with the goal of making you my wife." His voice was steady, his gaze unwavering. "I've never met a woman who challenges and compliments me as you do. Your intelligence, your compassion, your quiet strength, these qualities would make you an exceptional duchess." Katherine stared at him, scarcely able to comprehend his words. "Edward, you can't possibly mean that." "The scandal alone would." "I care nothing for scandal," he interrupted. "I care for you. And I believe, if you'll permit yourself to see past society's narrow definitions, that you might come to care for me as well." "I already do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But my uncle will never consent. He'll claim you're taking advantage of my vulnerable position. Then we shall prove him wrong day by day, until even the most skeptical must acknowledge the sincerity of my regard." Edward's fingers brushed her cheek gently. "Will you allow me to court you, Katherine Harrington? To show London society that true worth transcends their shallow judgments." Before she could answer, angry voices approached their sanctuary. Her Uncle Henry burst through the willow branches, his face flushed with indignation. "Katherine! This is entirely inappropriate. Come away at once." He turned to Edward with barely contained fury. "Your Grace, I expected better from a man of your position. My niece is not some toy for your amusement." Edward rose to his full height, his aristocratic bearing suddenly pronounced. "Mr. Harrington, I presume? I assure you, my intentions toward your niece are entirely honorable." "Honorable?" Uncle Henry scoffed. "Luring a dependent spinster into a private garden? The entire room is buzzing with speculation. You've compromised her reputation beyond repair." "Then I shall restore it by offering marriage," Edward replied calmly. A stunned silence fell over the garden. Katherine's aunt, who had followed her husband, gasped audibly. Sophia, hovering at the edge of the group, went pale. Uncle Henry recovered first. "This is absurd. You cannot possibly mean to marry Katherine." "I assure you, I am entirely serious." Edward's voice was steel beneath silk. "Miss Katherine Harrington possesses qualities I value far above the superficial attraction society prizes. I have made my intentions clear to her, and now I formally request your blessing as her guardian." Uncle Henry looked bewildered, as if the world had suddenly stopped making sense. "This is unexpected. I shall need time to consider." "Of course," Edward agreed. "Though I should warn you, my mind is made up regardless of your decision. I merely extend the courtesy out of respect for Katherine's position." Katherine found her voice at last. "Uncle Henry, I believe the Duke's offer is genuine." "And I?" She hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "I would accept it, with or without your blessing." Her declaration seemed to shock her relatives more than Edward's proposal had. Katherine Harrington, the dutiful, quiet niece who never caused trouble, was asserting her independence. "We shall discuss this at home," Uncle Henry said stiffly. "Your Grace, I will call upon you tomorrow to discuss the matter further." "I look forward to it," Edward replied, bowing slightly. As Katherine was led away by her scandalized relatives, Edward caught her hand briefly. "Until tomorrow," he murmured, his eyes conveying what propriety prevented him from saying aloud. The following week passed in a whirlwind of negotiations, gossip, and unprecedented attention. Uncle Henry, after recovering from his initial shock, proved surprisingly practical. If the Duke of Lowell was determined to marry Katherine, he would ensure she entered the union with proper settlements and protections. The bans were read, announcements appeared in the papers, and London society erupted in speculation. Katherine endured it all with newfound confidence, bolstered by Edward's unwavering support and daily visits. Each conversation, each shared joke, each serious discussion of books or politics or their future together convinced her that his regard was genuine. When whispers followed her at social gatherings, she found she could meet the curious gazes with equanimity, secure in the knowledge that Edward saw in her what others could not. Sophia, after initial jealousy, adjusted to the new reality with surprising grace. "I suppose he truly does see something special in you," she admitted grudgingly one afternoon as Katherine was fitted for her wedding gown. "The way he looks at you, it's rather romantic, in a peculiar way." "Thank you, I think," Katherine replied, smiling. "You'll be a duchess," Sophia continued, wonder in her voice. "My plain, bookish cousin a duchess." "Life takes unexpected turns," Katherine agreed, fingering the exquisite silk of her gown. "Though I hope you'll remember that my worth as a person hasn't changed, merely my circumstances." Sophia had the grace to look abashed. "I've been rather horrible to you, haven't I?" "At times," Katherine acknowledged. "But we were both trapped in society's expectations in different ways. Perhaps now we can both be free of them." On her wedding day, Katherine stood before the mirror in her bedchamber, scarcely recognizing the woman reflected there. The ivory silk gown, elegantly simple rather than ostentatious, complemented her figure perfectly. Her chestnut hair was arranged in a becoming style, adorned with orange blossoms and a delicate veil. But it was her expression that had changed most dramatically. Gone was the careful mask of resignation she had worn for years. In its place was serene confidence, the look of a woman who knew herself to be valued, not despite her differences but because of them. "You look beautiful," her aunt said from the doorway, genuine admiration in her voice for perhaps the first time. "The Duke is a fortunate man." Katherine smiled. "Thank you, Aunt. I believe we shall be fortunate together." St. George's Church in Hanover Square was filled to capacity, London's elite unable to resist witnessing the season's most unexpected match. Katherine walked down the aisle on her uncle's arm, her step steady, her gaze fixed on Edward waiting at the altar. His face as he watched her approach contained such naked admiration that whispers rippled through the congregation. The Duke of Lowell, notorious for his reserve, was looking at plain Katherine Harrington as if she were the most precious treasure in England. When they exchanged vows, Katherine's voice rang clear and true. This was no fairy tale where a magical transformation had made her beautiful in conventional terms. Rather, it was the story of a man who saw beyond convention to recognize the beauty of a keen mind, a gentle heart, and an indomitable spirit. Later, at their wedding breakfast, the Duke raised his glass to toast his bride. "To my Duchess," he said, his voice carrying across the elegant reception. "Who taught me that true beauty lies in character, intelligence, and authenticity. May society learn to see as clearly as I now do." Katherine smiled up at her husband, no longer concerned with the whispers that would undoubtedly follow them for years to come. Society might have called her plain, but in Edward's eyes, she was beautiful beyond measure, and that was the only judgment that mattered.